Everyone, welcome to the November 11th, 2025 Salina Public Schools Board of Education meeting. Happy Veterans Day, especially to the veterans in the room. Mr. Paul, thank you for your service, and to everyone watching as well. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. We do have one amendment. We will add a attorney-client executive session as item 12A, and then the two personnel sessions will follow in B and C. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Bonnie seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. We haven't had 7-0 for a while. Mr. Jim Fletcher, thanks for being here. Next up, I had to do that. I'm so sorry. Item 4A, recognitions and presentations. First, You Make a Difference Awards with Olivia Opat.
Good evening. Tonight we just have a few You Make a Difference awards to recognize. Staff members are nominated by their colleagues to receive a You Make a Difference award for their support of students and the mission of Salina Public Schools. Board of Education members surprise the recipients during their workday with a lapel pin and a handwritten note. Congratulations to the following staff members who are recognized for making a difference at SPS. Crystal Jackson, paraeducator at Hughesner Elementary. Lori Thornton, coordinator of special education at CKCIE. David Robinette, autism specialist at CKCIE. Jenny Kruckenberg, instructional coach at CKCIE. And Amber Grime, paraeducator at Meadowlark Ridge Elementary School. We are grateful for the dedication and impact these staff members make every day for our students, families, and staff. To learn more about them, visit the awards section on our district website. Thank you. Yeah.
We have community survey results to go over.
Okay, we have our 2025 community survey results. In October, we conducted our annual community survey with Excellence K-12. You might be familiar with this as this is the third year that we have done this specific survey. It is a brief telephone survey of 300 random selected households living within the district boundaries. There's only a few exceptions this year to a few questions. Otherwise, everything was identical to ones that were passed in the past 2 years in 2023 and 2024. And I will note any new questions as I go along. And the data from this year was compared to the data from 2023 and 2024 when it was applicable. First, you'll see our grading scores. The grading scale is based on a 5-point weighted scale, with 5 being A and 1 being F. Our top scores for 2025 are the quality of school facilities, performance of teachers, safety of students, quality of education, preparation of students for college, career, and technical training or employment, and performance of principals. Overall, the survey found that Salina Public Schools continues to excel in many areas and has strong support from the community in these aspects. Something I also want to note is that an overall score of 5 is only possible if all 300 survey respondents answered A each time to every question, and the overall district performance was graded a 4 or a B. Next, you'll see our district strengths. The next 3 questions are open-ended, so you will note that there is a don't know section. This is a pretty common response for open-ended survey questions. Some of the respondents might simply just have not had an example come to mind to them in the moment, and so they replied don't know. You will also see quality of education, teacher, staff, and administration, community support and involvement, and these were very comparable to our 2024 top scores, which were provides a good education and a strong curriculum, teachers and staff, don't know again, and strong community support. Next, when asked where could the district improve, respondents stated budget and spending, don't know, they are doing fine, doing what they can, and hiring and paying qualified teachers. Again, I want to note that don't know and they are doing fine and doing what they can are often very common answers to open-ended questions, and it just notes that they might not have had any specific concerns or issues come to mind. These responses were very similar to the 2024 responses as well, which were spending and budget, don't know, they are the experts in doing fine, and communications. When asked what respondents think the district's top priorities should be, it was budget and spending, emphasizing academics over athletics, safety and security, and teaching the basics. Again, these were very similar to the 2024 answers, which were providing a good education, teaching life and practical skills, and providing a safe environment for all. This was something that was new this year. Respondents were asked how familiar they were with the term chronic absenteeism, which is defined as a student being absent, excused or unexcused, for just 2 days each month, or approximately 18 or more days in a typical school year. 54% of the respondents said they were very familiar or somewhat familiar. And then when they were asked how aware they were that chronic absenteeism is related to graduation rates, 79% said they were very aware or somewhat aware of the connection. Awareness of district programs. 97% of respondents were very aware or somewhat aware of the district's extracurricular activities, which was actually up 12% from 2024. And 83% of respondents were very aware or somewhat aware of the elementary specials programs, and this too was actually up 12% from 2024. When asked about the importance of expanding early childhood education opportunities, like last year, a strong significant amount of respondents answered very important or somewhat important. You'll see that 85% answered this year and 92% answered that last year. Next, respondents were asked about the community perception of working in Salina Public Schools, and more than 3/4 of the respondents, 76%, felt that it was an excellent or good place to work, and it was only slightly lower than in previous years, both of which of those were 81%. Respondents were also asked their level of awareness about the district offering flexible scheduling for support staff. 44% said they were very aware or somewhat aware. This year's level of awareness was only slightly lower than last year's at 46%, but it was higher than the level from 2023, which was 41%, and 53% they said that they were either not aware or not aware at all. Both of these were reoccurring questions from prior years. A new question was asked about the level of awareness of the district's recent partnership with Kelly Education. 76% said they were either not aware or not aware at all, and 20% said they were very aware or somewhat aware. I would like to note that our partnership did just begin at the beginning of this school year. Next, when asked about shifting boundaries, there was one reoccurring question, whether the district should consider shifting the middle school and high school boundaries to maintain similar sized secondary buildings. More than half of the respondents, 58%, thought this was a good idea, while only 15% were not in support. The other 27% answered that they did not know. A new question was followed up and asked about support of the possibility of adjusting elementary school boundaries in the future. The majority of respondents, 84%, said they would be very supportive of this or somewhat supportive, while only 6% said they would be not very supportive or not supportive at all, and the other 10% answered that they did not know at that time. Other than friends and neighbors, how does the community receive news from the district, or how would they prefer to receive news? The district newsletter and mailer, the website, children or grandchildren, social media, local TV or radio, teachers, email, and then other was 2%. That just had some various answers that were similar to friends or neighbors. This question was also new this year. It was about the effectiveness and transparency of district communication channels. When asked how effective are the district's communication channels, such as email, website, social media, print materials, and meetings, in keeping community informed, 87% of respondents said that it was very effective or somewhat effective in keeping them informed, and 80% said that they have a good deal of confidence or some confidence that the district is communicating accurate and transparent information with them. What would they like to hear more about? Like answered in 2024, the number one topic was career and technical education, coming in at 42%, just slightly lower than 1%, at 43% last year. Other popular topics were preparation for college, career, military, bolstering school safety, dual enrollment and credit opportunities, and opportunities for early childhood education. Of those that were surveyed, 46% of the respondents currently have children or grandchildren enrolled at SPS, and 54% of the participants do not currently have children or grandchildren enrolled. However, 38% of those did previously at one time, and only 16% did not and has not ever had any children or grandchildren enrolled. For the final analysis, overall the survey results showed that Salina Public Schools continue to excel in many areas and has strong support from the community. This is backed by the high scores on grading sections, perception of district strengths, awareness of the district programs, and awareness of the importance of early childhood education expansion. New insights also reinforce this, showing that the community has high awareness and high trust when it comes to the district making informed decisions about the district's needs, as well as strong support of the district communications with the community. And overall, district scores went up from 2024, and they were higher or equal to those of similar school districts in Kansas and throughout the Midwest. And that is all I have for you.
Questions or comments? I think all good information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next on our agenda, strategic plan update with Shannon Rector.
Good evening. I'm excited to be able to bring you some updates to our strategic plan goals, and so I have some data to share with you tonight. Just a reminder, our strategic plan goals, we have three main goals that are kind of overarching of all of the areas that we have in our educational system, and that is communication, critical thinking, and social emotional. And so our goals are to increase students' skills in each of these areas. I wanted to start the presentation tonight with a little bit of background about state assessments and provide you some updates so that way the data that I share with you will have some context. We actually just went through a change in our state to the assessment process, and so lots of work was done throughout last spring and over the summer where they were looking at cut scores, where we were looking at the scale that they use to make decisions about the performance levels, and actually also updated performance levels. So there was all of this movement and evolving of our state assessments. And these changes were done to basically better align the assessment to the standards. But because of those changes, we really don't have a mechanism to look at the data from the 24-25 school year compared to the previous data that we had for our strategic plan goals. I do want to point out that there are some things that did remain the same, and so the standards were not altered or lowered. The content areas tested, ELA, math, and science were the areas that we had strategic goals around, but we also there was a history, government, social studies assessment as well, that those content areas didn't change, and then also the grade levels tested didn't change. So for the most part, what you'll see is that the reason for these changes is that they really were looking at the performance of our students on a lot of different measures, such as ACT, student graduation rate, how students performed for different levels of national testing and so forth. And what they were finding is that the state of Kansas, the cut scores that we set as a state were elevated compared to some of those other nationally measured assessments. And so when we were making comparisons, it looked as if our students were not performing at the level that they really were finding success at. And so they looked at the measures and they made those decisions to look at the cut scores. They, made adjustments to that scale, and then really also made adjustments to those proficiency levels. And so as you can see at the bottom of the slide here is that they did update the descriptions. And so now when we talk about level 1, that is the limited ability to demonstrate knowledge and skills for the grade level standards or for post-secondary success. So all of our assessments are measured they measure the grade level standards. And it's looking at the ability of the students to be able to demonstrate their knowledge. And so there's the limited ability to demonstrate knowledge, basic ability to demonstrate knowledge, proficient, and then advanced. So that is some updated wording to try to hopefully better align to the information that we're seeing from the other national tests. Yes?
Ms. Rector, I know something that came up at the Smoky Hill Education Service Center luncheon the other day from, there was some word out in the world that only level 3 and 4 were literate. And the superintendents and others at the meeting objected to that because level 2 does not mean they're illiterate. It just means that they aren't ready probably for college. But anyway, I thought I'd mention that while we were at the levels.
And that was one of the frustrations that we had as a state and that school districts also had, is that were the state assessment scores and how they identified levels, was that really a true reflection of the student's success that we saw beyond into the next grade and then also beyond to be college and career ready. And so, they have aligned these assessments to the national benchmarks, and they also were trying to create a more meaningful performance information for families and students. So that way they really did understand that when their student scored a 2 on that state assessment, it still meant that they were college and career ready for many of those content areas. And so to go into our strategic plan goals, we were talking about communication. One of the state assessment areas that we looked for communication was an English language arts assessment. And so when we originally set our goals back in 22-23, we said that we wanted to see a 13% decrease in the number of students performing at a level 1 on that state assessment by 2027. And so you see that first arrow, it says previous assessment performance decreased 3.9% from baseline. And that's kind of to show you this is where we were at with the old assessment. But we can no longer look at that data as we look at the data for our 24-25 school year. And so that's why you see the next bullet that says current assessment performance is 30.6% at a level 1. So we have 30% of our students that are performing at that level 1, which is that limited ability. And so we know that we want to shrink the number of students at level 1. And so you'll notice that it has green where it says decreased. Sometimes it's confusing. Is decrease a good thing or is it a bad thing? So if it was a good thing for us that we were going in the right direction, I went ahead and color-coded it as green. So we decreased, we were on the right trajectory for our reduction of level 1s. And then as we look at the next set, 10% increase in the number of students performing at a level 3 or 4 on the ELA assessment. And so again, we were on the right trajectory where we were seeing an increase. And so on the previous assessment, we had increased over time 2.8% from their baseline. But our current performance right now is that we have 40% of our students that are at level 3 and 4. And being at a level 3 and 4, that's that proficient and advanced level descriptor. And then this is the same pattern that we're going to see. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
real quick, just one thing as I'm going through this. Can you refresh my mind? What grade levels are we testing again?
So on ELA, math, and science, ELA and math, we do grades 3 through 8, and then grade 10. On science, we actually do grades 5, 8, and 11.
Okay, so as I'm thinking through this, when we're comparing year to year, we're not comparing necessarily student to student. It's a baseline of the class, correct?
Yeah, and really, when we look at these scores here, this is the district score. So this is taking all the grade levels, and this is looking at a composite score for the district. Now, at the building level, they're looking at grade level performance, and then they also step into a little deeper analysis, and they look and say, Johnny, as a third grader, here's where Johnny was performing. Is he still performing at that kind of same trajectory that he was performing before? You're welcome. And so as we look at math, now math is really important to us because this is actually where we have our accreditation process, our KISA goal that we wrote last year and that we were measured on in August and will be measured on again in January, is all around math because that was an area that we wanted to see our performance increase overall in this district. And so with this assessment, we were seeing that again, we were on the right trajectory, that we had decreased the number of 1s 2.5%, and that we had increased our 3s and 4s 3.8%. Our current standing right now is that we have 30% of our students at a level 1, and that we have 35% basically of our students at a level 3 and 4 in math. For our KISA accreditation process, we're not necessarily looking at scores. We're looking at those assessments and determining, what's happening in our classroom with our resources and the level that we teach at, is it aligned to the rigor of that state assessment, of that state standards? And so we're utilizing our test scores and something called mini tests to help gauge, are we looking at our instruction correctly to be at the right level so students have the opportunity to learn at that level 3 and 4. Yes.
So level 2 is, we're not talking about level 2s at all, then?
Right now, we don't have a goal that we wrote specifically to a level 2. And the reason for that is that really you're wanting to get those students that are in that very limited aspect, we want to get them up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we thinking about our big picture performance, we want our students to also be looking, scoring at that level in 3s and 4s. And a level
Right.
2 is saying that they are able to have the basic ability to demonstrate the standards. It's just that this is the way that we set our goals
Okay.
several years back.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ann?
I think we don't do level 2 because if level 2 increased, we wouldn't know if they increased by people dropping out of the upper parts or increased from the lower parts. So I think that's
Based
why.
on the way the goal
Yeah.
is written, that's correct. So if
Yeah.
we meet our goals by decreasing 1s, then the assumption is you're increasing 2s. If you also meet the second part of the goal of increasing 3s and 4s, you're pulling them from somewhere. So you may be pulling them from the level 1, you may be pulling them from level 2, but if we meet both of these things, the natural progression is that 2s would be changing as well.
Yep, thank you. And then in science, we see that we decreased our level 1s by 1.4 from our previous assessment, and that right now we're at a 35% at level 1, and that we are at a 35% for levels 3s and 4s. And science is actually an area that we are putting a lot of emphasis on at elementary. Just recently, you approved some resources for elementary science, and then also there's some work that's been happening at our secondary level as well. So science is an area of focus to make sure that we have the resources and that curriculum alignment that we need for that critical thinking, because it's part of our strategic plan critical thinking goal. The next thing that we have here is the strategic plan rubrics. And if you remember, we have rubrics that basically outline how do we want to see students performing in communication, critical thinking, and then we have what we call a self-directed rubric, which is also that social emotional. These rubrics really are used by the teachers to kind of step back at the end of the year and say, how are my students performing in each of these areas? And so they have a rubric, which is basically a mechanism to be able to look and see how students scores. And that rubric is a beginning score, emerging, developing, or demonstrating. And when we set goals with you several years ago, you wanted us to focus on or report on that highest level, that demonstrating level. And that for each of these areas that we would be looking for a 4% increase each year on performance for those rubrics. And so the current performance that we have for communication is a 28% of our students are performing at that demonstrating level, and that's a 4.8 increase from last year. And then overall, looking at our baseline, we have a baseline increase of 3.9 from that baseline. So we have seen this vary just a little bit over time. Critical thinking. Here's where we've had a lot of growth because it's really stepping back and looking at what's happening in our classrooms and thinking about what is the performance of our students. And so our current performance level is a 26.5% at that demonstrating level, which is a 6.6% increase from last year, which overall is a 19.7 from our baseline. Now, the self-directed rubric, this is actually one that, because of some data pieces that our actual baseline was established last year or the year before in 23-24. And so our current performance right now is 22.3%, or at that demonstrating level, and with just a slight decrease from what we had from that baseline. So you see that in red there. But if you look at that decrease, I do want to say one of the things that we're seeing behind the scenes on this data is that when I look at the data from building to building, that number of students going from emerging to developing, so going from that second level to that third level performance on the rubric, we saw an incredible amount of gain on that self-directed rubric this year. And at the building level, we actually report all 4 of those levels. And I think that kind of steps back to some of that self-directed aspect that we see with visible learning, knowing learning intentions, what are they learning and what is the success criteria, how will they learn it or how will they know when they've learned it. And I think that really ties into that self-directed aspect. And so hopefully next year we'll really see some great gains in this area. And then we have we also had strategic plan goals in relation to social emotional, and we had a couple of measures here that we used for that. One was the number of offenses that we called social emotional behavior offenses. So we were looking at things like physical aggression, insubordination, those things that really, if students don't necessarily have a great handle on their social emotional skills, we might see this elevation of these type of offenses. And actually last year we saw that this year we saw that we had a 15.4% decrease in the number of offenses compared to the year before. So almost 500 offenses in total were decreased in this area. And I want to really celebrate that because actually from the baseline, we had actually increased the number of referrals until this last year. And so as you see, it's a decrease of 1.3 from our baseline, but we had been on the wrong direction. And I know all the hard work that the principals and the teachers are doing in the classroom to help build those social emotional skills and that self-regulation and all of those pieces is really starting to pay off, and we're seeing a change in what's happening in our schools. And then you see the next number there we have is that we were looking at chronically absent students. And so when you think about the performance that we had, we were at 22.7, and we had basically stayed pretty flat here, but we had an increase last year, so not necessarily in the right direction, but staying pretty flat. And so one of the things that we've done with the help of Olivia's department and also Jody Craddock Iceland, they are working really hard to try to get information out to the community, and they've updated the website. The mailings that are going out really is talking about that importance of being in school each and every day. And so we know that we've already seen some success this year at our buildings where some of the buildings are really changing the trajectory that they were on before. But overall, though, this is a 10% increase from our baseline data. And then the last one here, this is not necessarily data that's part of the strategic plan, but as the State Department is working with the accreditation process and looking at those overall outcomes, one of the conversations that's happened over the last couple of years is around graduation data. And so we do expect to have an accreditation outcome aligned with graduation rate. And so our official graduation rate data doesn't actually come out until January, but what the principals go through kind of in the month of October is they look at every single student that kind of shows up on this graduation report, and we identify, is that student someone that should be counted for Salina Public Schools, or is that a student that we know went to another district or went to another state? So we look at each graduate separately, kind of from that data perspective. And so they close that window to review our data at the end of October, and then in January they will say what our official results are. But right now we're seeing that we do have an increase in our graduation rate from to 83.6 is the unofficial number that we have, which is a 2.5%. You'll notice that I have a terminology on there that says federal cohort. And when we look at graduation rate, we look at the students, we think about the 9th graders and their whole career through 12th grade. That's a cohort for that particular year, that graduating class. But one of the things that the state is also looking at is they have kind of a new mechanism of measure. It's called a state graduation rate or the state graduation cohort. And you'll see that our rate there is 86.8%. This is actually a new calculation method, and for the overall big gist of this change is that it's really trying to protect districts from credit-deficient transfers. You know that we've talked over the last couple of years about non-residents and having them be able to come into our district to take open seats and so forth. But one of the concerns that was across the state is wonder if you have a student that comes to you that's credit deficient. They're so far behind that even if you do the very best job you you can in your district, you might not get them to graduation in that 4-year process. And so we look at each one of our graduates, think about where they came from, and if they transferred in and they were credit deficient, we don't have to count them as part of our state graduation cohort. And so that's why you see that percentage is higher than the federal percentage. So it's 86.8. This measure will actually kind of come into effect in January of 2028 when we're looking at the data that we've had utilizing the state cohort number. And so we'll be bringing you updates over the next couple of years. So I wanted to include it in today's conversation, even though it's not part of our strategic plan goals. We know how important it is from pre-K to 12 that we're all focused on helping students achieve the success that they need to be able to walk across that stage. And so I would open it up to any questions. And just kind of giving a shout out in the sense that making this the best place to learn and work. You know, when we think about all of the work that you did with our listening sessions and so forth, our community said they believed in communication, critical thinking, and social emotional were those areas that we needed to focus on, because that's what's going to allow students to embrace those challenges and, you know, helps us inspire hope, but also makes it really a great place to learn. So thank you.
Question, sir?
Those are good numbers. Just a quick question. Is there a program or programs that you would say are statistically driving these numbers?
I really think that one of the things that we've been focused on is making sure that we have high-quality instructional materials in our classrooms. And so the work that's done by the teachers to evaluate curriculum or evaluate resources that are going to allow them to basically teach or instruct that curriculum, we have shifted it kind of in education overall to really look at the materials that are used. Are they research-based? Do we have evidence that they have best practice in them? And so we really are focused on that as a state, and I think that's driving the instruction. One of the areas that we've been looking at is letters training and for that structured literacy. So really reevaluating how we are looking at literacy in those younger grades, making sure that the students are getting the skills that they need to be able to go into comprehension. And then I just think also, too, that as we are working, we know that we have students that need a lot of different inputs. And our schools are masters at finding interventions and different ways to meet students' needs. So I can't say that it's from one single thing. I really do think it's from kind of where you've put your energies and efforts on resources, looking at making sure that we have interventionists in our building, at-risk staff. We have, you know, people at the high schools that really focus on tiered supports, making sure what we do for all students is what's going to move them forward. And if they don't have that, what we do at Tier 2 and Tier 3. So it really is that big picture, and that we'll kind of continue to focus on what is it that students needs, and then how do we adjust to meet those needs. And I think it's the adaptability and the flexibility of your staff probably, which is our strongest resource.
I do believe that early education is such an important part. When did we start preschool, Jeff? Do you remember? Like CK, what? Like CKCAU, like when we started Heartland and bringing it in all of our elementary.
Oh, when we started with USC 305 preschools.
Yeah. You don't know.
2015?
Yeah.
16,
So do you think that's part of why we're seeing, I would think we're getting them younger, so we have them.
I think early education, and I missed that opportunity to probably plug that a little bit. I always share that as an old high school principal, I didn't know how powerful early education was until I got to work with Heartland and I got to see what was happening in our elementary buildings. And so if you think of the evolution that we've had in our preschools, where, you know, originally we were kind of all inclusive in the sense of, the preschools mainly had special education students, and then we broadened it and had more general education students. And then when we started to even then take it to each elementary building, and so, you know, the fact that we now have a preschool in every one of our elementary buildings, that reduces one of those transitions that those students have. And so I think that that's a benefit. And we've also had lots of conversations about making sure that appropriateness of that instruction instruction at pre-K and K is developmentally appropriate for students, letting them build those social emotional skills to get them prepared for taking on the challenge of content. I think that's been a benefit. And then also just some of that vertical alignment that has been the mainstay of what they've talked about over the last 5 or 6 years. So that has been a great benefit.
Something that came to mind through all this, there have been several monumental things that I think we've done through the last several years, the preschool piece, letters training. It would be interesting if we had those landmarked somewhere, so that when you reflect back, you can know that this was done this year, and how does that change impact over time?
I think when we're living it, we don't really think back about that, because like kind of Jeff and I looking at each other going, when do we start pre-K? I mean, you just live it, you start moving forward, but that's a good idea to have some of those kind of landmark things that we did as a district. And we know that it takes, 5 to 7 years for some of those things to really show evidence of their impact. And it would be nice to kind of trace that back. Yes, good idea. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good information. We are on to item 5 on our agenda, approval of the consent agenda items. Those items this evening are minutes of the October 14th, 2025 regular meeting, the personnel report, financial reports, including the October bills list, September treasurer's report, September investment report, and September journal entries. Approval of one encumbrance listing to Eagle Technologies for the Commvault backup and restore system renewal in the amount of $75,395.53. Approval of the request to apply for a CTE reserve grant through the Kansas Department of Education in the amount of $16,260. And approval of a South High School softball fundraiser. Players will sell tickets to their annual chicken noodle dinner. Tickets will be sold from March 2nd through March 29th, 2026. Motion to approve.
Mr. President, I move we approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Thanks. In a second. Scott seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. We had one request, but I do not see that request was withdrawn, so no one to speak at our public forum tonight. So moving on to our action agenda, at item 7A, KASB Delegate Assembly with Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. We talked about this at our last meeting. So this weekend, the end of this weekend, we will all attend our Kansas Association School Board Conference, and Ms. Dan is going to be the delegate for USD 305, and so we want to give her marching orders, if you will. There are priorities that are listed by KSB in terms of what their organization will be focused on, working with legislators and lobbyists, and so she would need to confirm our support in those areas. And in addition to that, we have a position for president-elect that will be up. A good thing to happen this year is we actually have 2 candidates to choose from, and so we want to provide our support for one of 2 of those. And so there is a motion in front of the board to do them.
Mr. President, I wondered if, maybe we should wait till there's a motion, but I wondered if you could, since you were on the committee that drafted these, if you could say something about them.
I think they're great. So this is kind of an all-year process for the Kansas Association of School Boards, and while it's the organization's platform and legislative goals for the year, it very much is driven by the membership and board members who are board members of their local school districts who serve on the state association board, both on the board of directors and the legislative committee make up that kind of decision-making structure. So this is wholly board member driven from districts across the state. We get feedback after the legislative session on successes and challenges, both from our advocates that are employees of the state association and members who provide advocacy on behalf of their districts all throughout the year, working with their local legislative leaders that information comes back to a August meeting where we sit down and look at changes or tweaks, really using the prior year's document as the template for what comes next, and making any sort of changes depending on successes we've had, or again, challenges that didn't turn out the way we had hoped, things we see coming for the next year. So that all happens at that August meeting, and then they being the KASB advocacy staff and senior leadership, take the documents around the state to 15 different meetings to make sure everyone has an opportunity to see them and provide feedback, both in person and online through a virtual meeting as well. And then we as a committee come back to process any sort of questions or comments or concerns kind of after that. After that final meeting here. So the key priorities, I think it's page 43 of the packet, but on the top of the draft 2026 KASB resolution of state issues, the key priorities all were taken from comments at those 15 meetings across the state of member district board members and superintendents who provided their feedback on both the legislative documents as a whole, and then what of the priorities rise to the top for 4, 5, or 6 key things we want to focus on and bring special attention to.
Yeah, Mr. President, I might just expand. So as Gabe talked about, the work that is essentially carried over, it's things that are still left undone, things that have been discussed from the lobbyist perspective, what we would consider the best interests of our school districts. A lot of those things that you'll see in the priorities are things that are, I'll just call them, they're undone. They're not resolved or potentially still up for discussion. And so most of this information has been a rollover, a carryover, if you will, because there's still lots of work to be done. And if we had maybe, I call it a drop dead date, if you will, it's that session of 2027 and dealing with school funding. And so this is kind of all build up, if you will, towards that. And you look at those priorities, it's, the school vouchers, it's funding for special education, the funding formula in general. So really it's just a carryover of the work. Or do we still feel like KSB as an organization is headed in the right direction with their voice on behalf of us? And so I don't think there's anything brand new involved in that. I think it's more of, are we still on the right path, essentially?
Mr. President, I'll give it a shot. I move that we approve the delegate casting a supportive vote for the KSB legislative priorities, constitutional amendments, and the president-elect candidate, Kurt Herman, as presented.
I guess I had heard that Gabe had recommended the other candidate, but so
Motion fails without a second. If there's another motion that someone wants to make.
I could do it if I remembered her name.
Judy Price.
Judy Price? Okay, Mr. President, I move that we approve the our delegate, Dan Casso, casting a supportive vote for the KASB legislative priorities, constitutional amendments, and the president-elect candidate, I just forgot it. Judy Price, as presented. Thank you.
Is there a second to that?
Second?
Dan, a
Can I
second?
second myself doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I think, from what I read, I think both candidates for the president-elect position, I think, would be great choices. I know Judy from some work at KASB and appreciate her advocacy and heart for students and the work she's done on behalf of students and teachers across the state. So those were my preferences.
I appreciate somebody knowing her, because sometimes I go into this vote and have never met either one, so I appreciate that.
There is a motion and a second. Any other further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. And we are on to our discussion agenda. First up, item 8A, course proposal with Laura Lyons.
Good evening. It's nice to see all of you. I have a course proposal for agriculture leadership and communications for you this evening. I visited with some of the students who would be candidates for taking this course, and I'm very excited at the opportunity for them to exercise their leadership and communication skills if you approve this opportunity. This is a course that would allow students to take a fourth year of agriculture if they start with an intro to agriculture course as a ninth grader. And so it would be an additional application level in terms of finishing the pathway, but it allows them to take that fourth year. Why that's very important to our instructor who made this proposal is because FFA, which is the student organization that goes along with agriculture, it's an intracurricular student activity. And so they have to be enrolled in an agriculture course in order to participate in that activity. So if they have taken all of the courses by junior year, senior year, there isn't another course for them to take to participate. So it's important for that reason. This would be focused predominantly on those students in animal science, but the lovely young lady that I spoke to tonight is actually interested in being in agri-science leadership or perhaps becoming an agricultural teacher. So it made me very happy to know that we have a name and a face that would go with taking this particular course. What questions can I answer about this course?
Anything from board members? This is on our discussion agenda, but we could, yes, sir.
I just had one question. One question I had is, you said that there's nothing beyond the senior year, or beyond the juniors or senior year at this point right now. Is there any initiatives that we're looking at to be able to get any sort of ag ed, further education in there after that?
So this would apply to students who start ag as ninth graders. Those who start at 10th grade would have a senior level course. Sometimes what they do is they cross over into another pathway, like our metals pathway, which is the other agriculture course that we take. So sometimes they'll take that metals course, but it's a little different experience. So if they're really not focused on the production side and they're looking for an opportunity to stay involved with agriculture, that's the need for another course. In terms of connecting with other opportunities, it's not something that I've explored up to this point. Melanie Hammond is the one who coordinates our CTE, and she would be able to speak to it more informedly than I can. But it's certainly something that our teacher is passionate about.
Yeah, Paul, I might just also, I got the opportunity to attend our Building Bridges activity tonight and got to speak with the FFA group, the ag students, and that program has grown a lot in the last 3 years. I don't know what the beginning number was, but one of the junior leaders, an officer in that group, talked to me, and she said there was only 4 seniors when she entered the program as a freshman and actually became an officer, which is a little bit unheard of in an ag program with strength and growth, because typically those are your upper grades that are taking those officer positions. But because of the dwindling numbers in that program as a freshman, she was able to have an officership in that time. Since that period, they've grown it to, their membership now in the chapter is 50 students in 3 years. So I think the need, the interest level that this is, they're presenting at our middle schools during pathway presentations. There's interest from our 8th graders moving into freshmen, even recruiting kids into that as freshmen. So this is just extending opportunities because of the growth of the program as well.
Okay, that sounds great, because it just seems great to have this avenue for a springboard into higher education in the field.
Yeah, lots of opportunities there. There's, I mean, out of these probably 6 kids that I talked to, one has a desire to be a veterinarian, one's going into ag business, one wants to go into ag marketing, one has the potential to have an interest as an ag lobbyist, and so maybe working with the Kansas Livestock Association and dealing with it on the political side, but with an ag background. So they all were very interested and had a plan post-secondary. So it was a great conversation.
Mr. President.
Yes.
The question I always ask when we're looking at adding courses or adding things, what will we not do because we're adding something to the plate? What is the bandwidth of our staff to add a course?
That's a great question, and our principals always weigh in on these proposals, so they're aware of how it might affect their master schedules. Initially, this course will be embedded in that third-year course, which is an advanced animal science course. If it grows beyond that, this teacher is also teaching a section of metals, and so it's possible to have some flexibility there. And so that's, knowing that it's growing as rapidly as it is, it's kind of a wonderful problem. But yes, that could potentially become something that principals have to navigate in their master schedules.
Again, this is on our discussion agenda, but we could move it to action if anyone feels so called.
Mr. President, I would move that we take the course proposal and move it to our action schedule.
Okay. To approve as presented?
As presented.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. And next on our discussion agenda, textbook adoption.
So the textbook I'd like to propose tonight is one that our middle school math departments have worked very hard on. They actually initially began this process last year, and because of our consideration of our KISA plan and our focus on math there, I asked them to really be certain and really work hard as far as having a pilot of this particular material. And at this point, the exam copies that I have for you to look at, if you choose to do so, are dog-eared, because the teachers have worked really hard on curricular alignment of this resource. They feel very confident in it because it is also aligned to our assessment piece, and they've been working with personalized learning for students with this resource for several years. And so the middle school departments took a very long look at this and piloted the materials. And so we're a little early to adopting textbooks, but they are very certain that this resource is well aligned, is certainly something that our state would consider a high quality instructional material. Excellent scores on ed reports. You don't see very many that have 100% across the board on that metric. And so they're confident, and all of our other resources document that it's a good research-based program, so I feel confident proposing it to you as a potential resource for middle school math.
Questions, comments?
How is this different from what we currently do?
This program is actually more, in terms of pedagogy, a little more middle of the road. The resource we're using right now is heavily inquiry. And math research has not converged the way that literacy research has around things like letters. And so this program it begins with a process of exploration that allows students to connect their prior knowledge to what they will be learning in terms of the math. And then they have about 3 lessons where they really explore that and learn it. And then they have a really good lesson where they focus on practice. The state is really tied to the National Council of Teachers of Math, and they have 3 pillars. One is conceptual understanding. The second is procedural fluency, and the third is application of the mathematical concept. And so this resource actually has excellent practice in each one of those areas. So for example, when I was in school, I learned the algorithm, and then I got really fluent at the algorithm. That's a bit of an exaggeration. I was an English major. But the students have learned an algorithm, and then they've practiced it to become fluent. They're very good at using that algorithm. The big difference in materials now is there's a lot of emphasis on conceptual understanding, which means they don't just know the algorithm, they also understand why that algorithm works. And that's something that was missing from my experience as a math student. And this material, our previous material, had a lot of conceptual understanding, but not very much work on procedural fluency. And so our teachers were really missing that practice element in order to make sure that students were fluent in their mathematical skills. This particular resource is much more in the center and has practice in each of those areas. And so that's why I'm very confident that it will help students improve their skills in the long run.
I want to say that was a very good explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
As I'm looking at it, I guess we're talking 6, 7, 8. Have we been using iReady at 6, 7, 8? I knew we were using it in the elementary.
We have been using it for two pieces. At the elementary, this is true as well. We actually have a different math textbook. So iReady has been our diagnosis tool. So we have that assessment that we give 3 times a year to measure students and how they're progressing. But it also has something called personalized learning, which is really intervention. So it takes that diagnostic score and it figures out where students have gaps, and it assigns them lessons that really focus on those gaps and trying to close those gaps. And so it's really used for intervention, diagnosis and intervention. What's nice about pairing, and that's really why the middle school teachers were pretty enamored with this particular textbook, is that this will pair with that personalized learning and those lessons. And teachers are already familiar with the platform, so their learning curve is really going to be less because they'll be able to implement more quickly with really solid data to intervene when students aren't establishing those skills.
I guess bringing that together, we're not currently, from a textbook standpoint, using iReady. So this would be basically realigning everything.
Yes, and
Okay.
adding the actual resource that goes along with that system. That is correct, yes. Good, great question.
If the board is willing, I would ask that we move this to the action agenda and approve it as presented.
Is there a second? Dan, a second. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you so much. Next on our agenda is school board reports and upcoming dates of importance. The only date listed here, we will be in Wichita as a group this weekend for the Kansas Association of School Boards Convention. We'll start with Dana on the school board report.
All right, I gave a You Make a Difference award to Amber at Meadowlark today, and she was having a rough day and said it was the perfect day to get this. So I love that we get to do this. Parks and Rec, still having fun with that. But the biggest thing they've got going on right now is I think they're putting an adaptive park right across the street from you all. And it sounds like it's going to be really nice. They've got a grant for it. They're working on it. They're looking at the best way to lay it out. And I thought we had thoughtful discussion about what would be best for kiddos. And so I'm excited about that. Parking might not be great out there, but I went to Building Bridges tonight, which was, I've never been able to go before, and I really enjoyed that. I know they've kind of moved times around, so I don't know if that was the best time for everybody, but it worked, and I appreciated it. And this is a side note. I have a daughter who's a 7th grade English teacher in St. Louis, and I got asked to go on the field trip with 7th grade boys and girls. And all I can say is if we're not doing that in our elementary schools, we're missing the boat. Have your parents go on the field trip, because I learned, one, what a great teacher she was, but I also just learned how fun these kids are, how challenging they are, but how much we have. I mean, we just have this little brains and bodies and minds to mold, and it's really important. So if we're not doing that, I'd like to see us do more of that.
I attended the Smoky Hill Education Service Center Executive Cabinet meeting, and things are going well there. They are still adjusting to a bunch of new personnel. I also attended the Smoky Hill Education Service Center Legislative Luncheon. That was very interesting. It seemed fairly positive. I mean, I guess they are kind of telling us that they aren't going to have much more money for schools, but it seemed, I guess, the people in attendance other than the legislators were all kind of working together and presenting a united front as for what the schools needed. Didn't necessarily seem like the legislators were going to work on those things, but at least they know where we stand. I did go to Building Bridges tonight, and I enjoyed the delicious culinary presentation by the culinary classes, and I spoke with the teaching path and the digital media and a few others, and it was nice. It was a little different than last year. No big presentations except the introduction. I also attended a Zoom meeting put on by the Kansas Interfaith Alliance and the Kansas NEA about how to talk with our local community and about to our legislators about supporting public schools in the coming year. So that was an interesting one. Thank you.
Good evening. I as well attended the Smoky Hill Educational Service Center's legislative luncheon and found it interesting as last year. And so we'll hope that we can move forward on some of these initiatives that they're looking at and trying to get some of our issues resolved. And really, like Ann was saying, attack the problems that we really need to be attacking instead of dancing around other things. So outside of that, today I attended the Salina Veterans Recognition Ceremony at Sunset Park, and interestingly enough, Cornerstone Traditional School had their first graders again this year. Not the same ones as last year, but the first graders went up and they recited the entire Declaration of Independence in its entirety, which was pretty amazing and very heartwarming to see. So it's really good to see. The keynote speaker was retired Colonel Karen Weiss, and she's one of my friend's wives, and she told the story about what the oath of office is in light of what the sacrifice of veterans and the community is about and how it's grown since its inception. So very interesting again and worthwhile of time. Thank you.
I attended the NEA meeting, also did the luncheon and other just sporting events.
Well, this is my last school board meeting. I'm not going to cry either. So, but I originally ran for school board because I love kids and I love teaching, and I thought I could make a difference. But in the 4 years I've been here, I've learned a lot about the education system, especially 305, and I met a lot of wonderful people and built some friendships also. And I want to just thank Gabe because all 4 years I have got to sit by Gabe, and he taught this older lady how the computer things and all the letter things. What does that mean, you know? So I told him after the election, I texted him and said, he's going to have to get a new sidekick. Hopefully, they'll be as fast a learner as I am. Well, so I just really believe everyone's got a purpose. You know, God's planted a purpose in each one of us, all the kids, and we need, those kids need an education to fulfill the purpose that God put on the inside of them. And I know God's got a plan for 305, and I will be praying for all of you. So thank you for making my 4 years, I couldn't figure out what the word is, a blessing. That's the only thing I could think of, that you made my 4 years. It's been exciting. It's been, stressful, but it's, I just love you guys, you know. So my life is full of adventure, and I can't wait to see what God's going to open up for me next. So thank you all for making my 4 years here fun.
Bonnie, you looked that way when you said I love you all.
Oh, I forgot. You haven't been here, so you know. What's your name?
Yeah, I've missed a couple meetings. No report necessarily. I did want to just point out, though, I get to spend some time with a few of our teachers over the last couple months in just different settings. And one thing that I heard resounding was how successful the Kelly education piece has been. Not only do they have substitutes, and they're very appreciative of that, but they said the quality of what they have in the classroom is really helpful. And I think that that's important to know that they're sharing that. Thank you, staff, for all you've done to we've battled that, and Dana, you finally solved the substitute problem. So, my job's done. Thank you.
I presented You'd Make a Difference Awards to the co-op staff that were recognized at the beginning of the meeting, and the pair at Hughesner, and had a great time meeting with those folks and celebrating what they do so well in our schools and everything they do to make Sun Public Schools the best place to learn and work. Not only supporting in those nominations their students, but their fellow staff members and colleagues in ways to help students. So I attended a Public School Champions event that was hosted at Smoky Hill Education Service Center by two state organizations working to really inspire and activate our communities in support of the great things happening in public schools across the state of Kansas, and making sure that message gets to not only those that are in Topeka currently working on our behalf in the legislature, but as we are electing representatives, that the support of public education and what it means for communities across the state is at the forefront of that discussion. The public school system in each community across Kansas is truly the identity of that community, and the success of it. As we talk about our students and the future of each of our communities, our students are the future of our communities. So it's the identity and the success of every town and city across our state. And we all should be looking for ways to support that message in our conversations daily, in the way we talk about our communities and talk about our public school system, the way we talk about our jobs and careers related to education and all those sorts of things. So an interesting event and conversations that will continue over the next several years, and especially 18 months ramping up for a 2026 election. So, and then also attended the legislative forum on Friday, or on last week, Thursday or Friday, there at Smoky Hill Education Service Center. Interesting to hear kind of comments from that, and I also attended a Ron Estes a lunch professionally with him yesterday, and it's interesting having legislators in a room outside of Topeka or Washington, D.C., and how level-headed people sound when you're having a discussion like that, and how challenging it must be to work with leadership in both the Kansas House and Senate and nationally the same way. We saw it last week with two of our local legislators being punished for votes they felt were right for their constituents, and it's a tough thing to watch that level of game playing in how we conduct our state business and national business. So that is all I have. Next on our agenda, Superintendent's report. Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I first of all would like to start, Bonnie kind of segued to this, so just the acknowledgement of Miss Bonnie Schamberger, her work as a board member. Normally we would recognize board members in December, but due to a personal conflict, Miss Bonnie's not going to be able to be here in December to receive her plaque. So just wanted to say how much I appreciate her in my short time working with her. Bonnie was elected to the board November 2nd, 2021. I attended her first board meeting on January 11th, 2022, serving one term. And I just always appreciate the positivity that you have in whatever we're talking about and dealing with. And I've appreciated your support for me in our short amount of time, and you'll be missed. And I just wanted to have everybody show a round of applause and thank Bonnie for her service to USD 305. A lot has happened since our last meeting, and we've had parent-teacher conferences, which the results of that have been great. Good turnouts at those conferences, talking with administration. Dr. Rector pointed to our chronic absenteeism campaign, if you will, and so we handed out a lot of information about that, educational information about what that means, definitions, dealing with students specifically during those times who might be on the radar or heading in that direction. Also education about the assessments that we have, the language. That really is a burden on us as educators, is to get this messaging out, this clear messaging of what those means. I think based on some conversations and maybe what we saw a little bit through the legislative luncheon the other day, is there's a disconnect between analyzing data, what we see and what we're talking about versus what legislators see and what they're talking about. So I think moving forward, we certainly have a lot of work to do from an educational advocacy standpoint, is not only telling our story, but making it bigger and broader than USD 305 in our community. So we'll continue to work on that. My team will continue to work on that, sitting down and building relationship with those legislators to try to come to a better understanding of what our needs are and certainly what we're advocating for. To be honest, it needs to be less adversarial than it's been in the last several years. We need to have some good sit-downs, have an understanding. I think we do have representatives in our community that are willing to do that, at least on this surface level, is to have conversations. So looking forward to opportunities that are coming our way for that. I attended a Board of Control meeting mid-October. The Dean of the College for Kansas State, Dr. Mercer, came to visit just to check in on us as a district, offer any support that they might give for our educators and students. It was nice to see her again. I attended instructional leadership meetings, lots of great work from Dr. Rector's office in terms of this next phase, if you will, of amping up our rigor in the classroom, taking the next step with visible learning. I think we're to that point where we're ready to do that. Also attended the Champions for Schools. Again, great ideas. Game On for Kansas Schools was probably the initial organization as advocacy way back, maybe 2 lawsuits ago even. It was started, and just a powerful message, again, of positivity, good things, and hopefully cleaning up misinformation. They do a wonderful job of that. So looking forward to how we can contribute in those ways. I was able to be a part of mock interviews from some of our students at South High, which was super exciting. All of these happen to be young women, all interested in going into the health field. And so we got to ask them questions. I have to tell you how proud I am of them. Me at their age would have been absolutely terrified. There was 5 adults, I think, in the room, all sitting at a table staring at them, as of course any interview would be, and they handled it beautifully. So we have a lot to be proud of with our young people. Met with the Kansas Board of Regents, and we, again, have outstanding staff. Want to reiterate that, but a special shout out to Ms. Mowbray. She seems to be the gold standard in adult education, and the Board of Regents knows that. And so she needs to get high praise, but got high praise from them, certainly. And so that was a great visit, and actually got to connect with the gentleman. He is the president of the Board of Regents that I had his kids in school when they were in elementary school back in Garden City. So it was a pretty cool connection to see him again. Kelly was mentioned earlier this evening, and we had our 90-day review with them. I've been very impressed with the Kelly organization, their willingness to problem solve with us, work with HR department. It has taken a lot of the people over across the room to make that work. But nobody's being frustrated. I think the results from our perspective is what we intended them to be in terms of our initial goal. And I think the power for me in their company is they're not satisfied. And so we're right now, if I remember correctly, Ms. Wright can correct me, but I think we're 31% increase in our fill rate as a district collectively from where we were a year ago. And so that's great. And again, I think that was maybe our benchmark that we started. If we could get to there, obviously making a positive impact. But their goal is 90%. So we still have some work to go with. And again, Ms. Paisley and their organization, we count her as one of ours. She should be one of ours. She is a rock star. And I think a Salina graduate, if I remember correctly. So again, a real celebration moment there for watching her. Again, as a young person dealing with a group of older adults, she absolutely holds her own. So very, very good interactions there. Admin meetings, we had our monthly admin meeting, which continues to be great work. We are continuing with our conversation with graduation rates and looking into solutions and challenges that we might have, and even internally of do we have roadblocks that we kind of create for ourselves. So it's a process to go through, but they've all been great about working with that. Like Mr. Gardner, attended the NEA leadership meeting as well. the legislative luncheon, the only thing that I would probably add to other comments that were made about that was I think there's two real focus areas. There'll be more that impact education. Selection of our judges, although not an educational issue, it probably has a major impact for us moving forward as we continue to have these differences in how schools are funded. And so that's a big topic that certainly will be on the legislators' plate this coming session. And then the other one, broadly spoken, is just school budgets. So we have a general fund budget and we have a SPED funded budget, and I think those will both be under a lot of scrutiny right now. Our current funding formula has been in place for over 20 years, and in our eyes, it works. And so the legislators certainly would have the option to just lift the sunset, which it's supposed to sunset in 2027. I don't believe that's the direction that they're going based on our conversations and our work with their task force. But that would be an option, and so whatever comes out of that could have a dramatic impact on schools across Kansas in terms of how schools are funded, where money is diverted, and so again, there's lots of work to be done there. Special education funding it should be the same conversation, but it's not. I also believe that they will come with a different way to fund special education, meaning right now we do it on a staff basis, so we get funding based on the number of staff members that we have. The initial conversations that I'm hearing, and maybe I will make some assumptions that it's headed that way, is to change to a student model or a student-weighted model. There are certainly pros and cons to that as well. So those probably three topics for us are really directly impacting us as educators, and I would assume would take up a majority of the legislative session in the upcoming session. Also got to attend the centralized football game last week, which was great. Had an opportunity to do an interview at halftime, which was fine as well. And then great news for both of our football teams coming back home this week as another round of playoffs. And so we're excited and want to congratulate coaches, players, staff for their success both at Central and South. Looking forward to attending that game as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, attended Building Bridges, outstanding event. I think we probably had maybe 100 participants or so, if I had to take a rough guess, and really have picked up some steam there. We want to just continue to build those partnerships, and Ms. Hammond's done an excellent job not only with tonight's event, but just building those partnerships and creating pathways for our kids. Lots of great conversations happening, and again, I got to go around and see some of our talented students. Last thing, Ms. Lisa and I continue to work on our site council presentations. We're proud to say we will be done this coming month. So excited to have those kind of in the rear view, but they obviously have been very valuable meeting our folks in those areas. And then lastly, just wanted to shout out to the board, give a shout out for the board on behalf of Heartland's Parents as Teachers program. They have been recognized. We got a notification early last week that they've been recognized and will receive a National Blue Ribbon distinction for their program. It's very difficult to get. There's lots of hoops to jump through and lots of things that they have to complete through an application process, and it just really goes to Miss Lisa Larson and her work and her staff to develop, as we mentioned earlier, the importance of an early childhood program, second to none, truly, based on a national level. So really want to just acknowledge them and their success. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have next executive session first, 12A for attorney-client. That is written on there's a paper sheet provided at your space for how many minutes? Okay. 10.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education go into executive session at 6:55. Give us a couple minutes, 52, for 10 minutes for the purpose of consultation with Board Legal Counsel on matters which are privileged in the attorney-client relationship, which if discussed in open session would waive that privilege, and at the Board of Education reconvene into open session at 7:02 in the SEC room.
Your motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. We'll be back in open session in this room at 7:02. open session and do have action to take as a result of that executive session.
Mr. President, I move that the board decline the offer to purchase the district's property on Magnolia Road for $350,000 submitted by David Olson on November 11th, 2025.
Second.
Scott seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Next, 12B, the first personnel session on your sheet of motions. We'll need 15 minutes for that.
Mr. President, I move the Board of Education go into executive session at 7:06 for 10 minutes.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
Okay,
Good.
we can do,
No, you're good. Good.
okay, 7:06 for 10 minutes. 15 minutes for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel and their contractual obligations, because if this matter were discussed in open session, it might invade the privacy of those discussed, and that the Board of Education reconvene into open session at
7:21.
7:21 in the SEC room.
Is there a second? And seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. We'll be back in open session in this room at 7:21. Open session and do have action to take as a result of that executive session. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, first, I move that the board approve Resolution 0625 terminating the contract of employment with Amanda Freeman for the 2025-2026 school year.
Second.
Dana seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. And another motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve Janelle Feller's request for extended health leave through January 4th, 2026, and that she be returned to the classroom when she is released by her physician to return to work.
And Paul seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. We do have one more executive session, item 12C, and it's the last personnel motion on your sheet for 15 minutes. Please.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education go into executive session at 7:25 for 15 minutes for the purpose of discussing the evaluation of non-elected personnel, because if this matter were discussed in open session, it might invade the privacy of those discussed, and that the Board of Education reconvene into open session at 7:40 in the SEC room.
And seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. We'll be back in open session in this room at 7:40. back in open session and have no action to take as a result of that executive session. So we are at the end of our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
I move, Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Why not?
Scott seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you all. We'll see you in December.